So I'm Gary Gay, the president of HBNC. This is July 21st, our summer meeting for this year. And we are now going to have a reading by Lew Watts. So let me introduce you to him. He's going to read for us. And when his reading is over, we can have a few minutes of commentary. We can ask him some questions and things. And then we are going to have, we have some business things we just have to take care of. Probably takes about 10 or 15 minutes at the most. And then we're going to come back, and then Lew has a presentation for us, and I'll tell you about that when we get to that part of it. So let me tell you about Lew. Lew Watts was born and raised in Cardiff, Wales. He is a haibun co-editor of Frog Pond and the author of TikTok 2019, a haibun collection that won an honorable mention in the Haiku Society of America 2020 Merit Book Awards. And I hope I say this name, Era 2023, both from Snapshot Press. He is also the co-author with Roberta Berry and Rich Yeomans of Haibun, A Writer's Guide, Beyond Poetry. Lew was a corporate executive for many years, and after retiring, headed the World Bank's external expert panel on climate change. In 2016, he was awarded an honorary doctorate by Bristol University in the UK. He lives in Chicago with his wife, Roxanne. His other passions are fly fishing, rugby, and gin martinis. Okay, Lew, take it over. And correct my spelling or anything. You have to unmute yourself. Lew, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Well, thanks, Gary. And hello, everyone. And thanks to HBNC for inviting me today. Lots of familiar faces. And one face missing, as we know, and a truly lovely woman and a wonderful poet. So I know we'll talk about Debbie later. So I'm going to be reading from this book, and it's pronounced Ira, and I'll come back to that later on. This won a Touchstone this year, and also was the Haiku Society of America's winner for haibun. So thanks to the judges. I think many of the judges are on this call, so thank you very much for that. So when Bruce first invited me to talk to you today, he said, well, why didn't you read from Ira? And we'd quite like to have a didactic presentation on haibun. So I rapidly Googled the meaning of didactic and realized that I needed to give a presentation on haibun. So one thing up front on Ira, it's actually very difficult to convey what Ira is about without reading almost the whole thing. And the reason is that when John Barlow, the great John Barlow, I would add, and I were working on this, we wanted the haibun in here, which are basically stories and snapshots from my life. We wanted them to shift both in tone between, you know, some sad poems and some happy poems, but more importantly, through time. So it's not chronological. These things just literally appear. We wanted that randomness to almost sort of hit the reader. And the intent was that if you turn a page, it's an element of surprise when you encounter a new haibun. So it's difficult to do that because the way that these things are joined are by haiku that are between them. And so the haiku, if you like, link and shift from one haibun to the next. So to give you a feel for that, I'll just read, by the way, this is going to be a relatively short reading because the main emphasis would be on the presentation. I'm going to read a few haibun from this to try and give you a feel for the kind of work that's in there. Later on in the presentation, I'm going to be talking about haiku within haibun and the roles of haiku, the importance of haiku within haibun. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to illustrate the points I make in that presentation by showing you some more haibun from Ira. So even though this initial one is a short reading, I will be including other haibun from Ira later on in the presentation, okay? So let's begin. So Ira starts with a single haiku, and it then leads into a haibun, and the title of that haibun is Hiriaith. So I'll pronounce that again, Hiriaith. And hiriaeth is a very unusual, almost unique word in the Welsh language. And it's untranslatable, but the closest is, and this is the quote, it's a deep yearning for a home, a place, or a time one can never return to, or perhaps that never was. And I'll give you a little bit of a hint. That final phrase, and perhaps never one was, is something that reviewers haven't quite picked up on Ira. That my life, actually, the early part of my life was pretty traumatic. And yet we all look back on those early days with rose-tinted glasses. And so when I long for my past, not really. So, but anyway, hiriaeth. And then there's a couple of haiku, and then it rapidly changes to a different place, which is Houston, just after I arrived in the United States in 2002. So I'll read these haiku and these two haibun, and I think you'll see how they're linked together. All right. The first haibun is relatively long. It's the longest in the book, but here's the introductory haiku. Slow descent, this sudden urge to share life stories. And the haibun. Hiriaeth. I was born 56 years ago in Cardiff, Wales, in the slum district of Splot. That's actually a real place. On days when I wasn't getting the shit kicked out of me, I would never have imagined being in Washington, D.C. on this April day. Everyone is nervous. Fathers check their watches. A mother readjusts her son's necktie, and even the newborn swaddled in lace has a luster of sweat. As the hour approaches, the doors open. Form a line, the guard says, and remember, it's alphabetical. Free school lunch, the hollow clang of a soup ladle. An usher leads us into an oak-paneled room. We state our family name and country of birth before taking our seats, a final check that we're in order. I count 4 men from Somalia. Their knuckles are white. We sit in silence. No one coughs. Suddenly, a judge steps onto a podium flanked by 2 American flags. He is solemn, dignified, and he speaks of the history and importance of the ceremony. A woman in a hijab begins to shake. We're asked to stand, right hand raised. The words of the oath of allegiance appear on a screen, and the room speaks in a low murmur. I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince. Dad's will, his old Zippo, in the thumbprint. We're welcome to the United States of America. As we file out of the room, a woman in a large purple headdress hugs me, and several men shake my hand. The same guard opens the main door and we spill out into the light. Unknown friends appear with confetti. Gradually, the crowd begins to disperse. Gust of wind, out of the street gutters, cherry blossoms. I should feel joy and gratitude, but I can't escape the sense of betrayal of where I'm from. And that's when it hits, the gut punch ache of longing for all that's lost, for all that's gone, and the bittersweet sound of a word I know will never stop. This is the haiku that links to the next second haibun. Bitter wind, unable to answer in my mother tongue. So we shift now to Houston. Passed on, no more cease to be. That's not your pet, she says, sliding the photograph across my desk. Besides, it's dead. When the Pet of the Month competition was launched, it was made clear that all employees were expected to participate, which is how Lionel was born, a cockroach lying on its back wearing photoshopped sunglasses. And so the committee has decided to disqualify you, she continues. Faced with a stern face and a high Southern Baptist rough collar, I try to remain serious, even hurt. I talk about how important Lionel is in my life. but it's clear there's no appetite for British humor. The green sheen of a Carolina parakeet nailed to its perch. So on that last one, it's actually true. We did have a pet of the month contest, and I did enter my pet, which was a cockroach lying on its back with Photoshop sunglasses. My head of marketing put it together. I was disqualified. But it is true. And the reason I'm pointing that out is that every single haibun in Ira is true. And I can say that because John Barlow made sure that every single haibun in Ira was true by repeatedly questioning me to make sure that if it's true. So when you read it, some of them are pretty difficult to believe, but they honestly they're all true. So let's move on. I guess the three themes from Ira, I would say, in the book is the first theme is there are poems about childhood, actually filled with trauma, and you'll hear some of those. Second is there's a theme of my mother going through it, and she took her own life in 1979, exactly 1 year to the day after my father died. But she spent most of her life in mental institutions, and she suffered terribly. And then the third is emergence, and emerging from that dark past. And I mean, I escaped Splot. I went to university. I got a PhD. I went overseas and I worked for many years. But there's still this haunting of the past. And so those are the three themes that go through Ira. And so I'm going to give you a flavor of some of those, and I'll make some comments on these haibun. So the first, I'll go on to two haibun that are actually back to back, unusually in the book. And the reason for that, they both were published in the same issue of the Haibun Journal, so the Wales Haibun Journal, when Paul Chamber was editor. So the first one is called How Dark Was My Valley. The faces are black and downcast, but to me he's unmistakable. The bag slung over the left shoulder, the slight drag of the right foot. I wave as he walks through the gates and he smiles before lighting up. He ruffles my hair, and the scent of a shift full of sweat lifts from his clothes. They found your mother yet? He asks. Choir night. Dad clears his voice down the sink. So my mother used to escape from the mental hospital now and again, and they would find her. And I spent many years from about age 5 to 11 staying with different aunts for 1 or 2 years at a time. And my brother stayed with others, and so we didn't see each other very much. And some of the poems relate to that as well. So, and the one that was back to back is this one. They say I have my mother's eyes. The Severn Estuary has an extreme tidal range, up to 50 feet. Though the speed of its flow is less impressive, it can take several days for an object to drift the 10 miles from the Rumney River Bridge in Cardiff to the rocks at Sully Island. A slight catch in the vicar's voice, closed casket. So I've written quite a lot of stuff about abuse. And I would like to say that haibun has been really important to me. It's been the way that I've actually managed to surface a lot of this. What took a long time was actually writing anything about my mother's death. And so that one there was probably the first. And even then it doesn't say much, it just says enough. So anyway, moving on. Another one from Houston for you. Again, remember, this is true. It's called Houston, We Have a Problem. The handwritten note says they're praying for me. If I were to open my heart to Jesus, he would forgive me. Indeed, they have already done so, despite my terrible words. After 2 further paragraphs of collected love in which I'm invited to join their Bible reading at breakfast, lunch, or after work, it is signed with a flourish. The printed name below reads Dawn Rollings, Mrs., my HR manager. Marble altar, the scent of Old Spice on a manuterge. I shouldn't have been surprised. Most of the company's meetings started with a prayer. But our first team building session, where I asked my staff the 2 most important things in their lives, God was always mentioned first, followed by a less important thing like gun, dog, child, husband, or wife. When it came to me, it was clear I had to say something. Now, I know you all think I'm an atheist, but I'm not. I do believe in God, I said to gasps of relief. I just don't like him. Voice breaking the church choir master's grip. So each of my aunts came from a different religion, Church of England, one was Catholic, one was Baptist. So I had a lot of interactions with clergy of different denominations, and they were all abusers. And so the final one in IRA is called the fairest one. And I should say that there are 6 sections in IRA, and there's 1 poem of my mother in each. And then there's, oh, and by the way, there's fun ones as well, right? So they're not all like doom and gloom. So this is called the fairest one. It's the very last in IRA. And again, remember, this is true. It was 30 years ago to this day. I remember that it was cold outside and there was a full moon, just like that other night. You'd both cleaned your teeth and were tucked into bed, and for the first time I decided to mention her. I can still see the eye rolls, still hear that long, sarcastic snigger. That's when something broke inside of me, and I never have spoken of her since, and I never will, except this. Her hair was coal tar black, and her psoriasis sloughed off flakes as white as her skin. You've never asked, but her name was Ira, the Welsh word for snow. A sudden flurry, my mother's screams from the quiet room. So that's the reading finished.